Hey everyone, welcome to Kultura. My name is Emer and Tanciatco, your host for this podcast. Along with me is Steve Meim, who's going to be my co-host for this podcast. And welcome to joining us in our conversations about working in industry, working in the game industry and the entertainment industry. I wanted to create this podcast for the fact that we want to talk about Filipino Americans and Filipinos in general and globally about the game industry and also the entertainment industry for that matter. And so for the reason why this podcast is titled Pixel Kultura, because we're pixel pushers and we're pushing to create things for the entertainment industry, whether it be video games or movies or comics or whatever media that really piques your interest visually. But yeah, I mean, as far as what we're doing here, we're gonna talk about different topics about the industry in general, about what the landscapes involved with that industry, and also with other avenues of entertainment as well. But yeah, I think along with me and Steve Meem, thank you for joining me. You're going to be my co-host for this show. But I appreciate you coming in and joining me in this podcast.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. I know that we've worked together at the same company for several years, and it's interesting how you know of somebody, but even though you may have worked in the same location for several years, you may not have gotten some in-depth information and kind of insight into who they are as a person, what their motivations are, and I just love being able to take this opportunity to get to know you a little bit better after all of these years. And for me, I absolutely love what you want to do with this podcast and how we can reach out to game developers and Filipinos. And I know that I've got a drive to kind of not just share my experience, but help motivate people in their careers. And if they want to turn entertainment into a career choice, then that's absolutely what I'm here for. And so however I can be of service to you, to your fans, to the general population out there, that's what I'm all about.
Exactly, yes. And that's the thing that we want to do here. We want to share stories, we want to share experiences, talk with some other people about what their experiences and what their motivations and things like that, what drives them to getting into the industry. So, I'm glad that most of you, if any of you do join our podcast to listen, I'm hoping this would be a very fruitful podcast for you. And this is, I'm welcoming for those of you who are in the industry or people who are just curious about, how the industry works and how we fall into that industry and where we fit in. It'll be a great benefit for you to understand how that works too. So with that said, welcome to Pixel Kultura, and we're going to move on to our next topic. Let's talk about background real quick. My background, if you didn't know, I've been working in the game industry for around 17 plus years, mostly working at Sony PlayStation. I had a chance to work on different avenues of art. I first started as a texture artist for characters, working on a PS3 game called Lair, which is a very interesting experience. That I had. It's just the first time experience getting into that industry, just learning how to do things, and for me to understand how cinematics work was an eye opener for me, and how the culture was back then was another definite eye opener too, because the way the work culture back then was very interesting, and it's something I would love to share later on down the line at some point, but from that point, I did grow into working into character art and also for scanning services that this particular department at Sony PlayStation was offering. And then later on, closer to where I'm at, I was getting more involved with environment art and working with external developers, B2B services to help create some of the art that you see in most of the first party titles that you see today. For me to get into this industry, I was actually had a background in art initially, and I actually went into computer science of all things, just to get a degree in programming, but that didn't work out for me, and I actually wasn't sure where I was going at this point, and I did start working with the government for a little bit And then from that point, it made me change to the fact that I want to focus on maybe getting into games because I really loved playing games, since I was a kid. just playing with the Atari 2600 was my very first console system, and that just kept, that stayed with me. I mean, it was an influence in me getting into art, and how I can put myself in being part of that process of creating a video game has stuck with me for a very long time. And I think I just came to a point where, you know what, I want to get into this industry. And I literally had to jump into another college to learn this stuff. It was the Art Institute of San Diego, California. And it was one of those vocational colleges, mind you. This is one of those for-profit schools. The one thing I do have benefit for is just networking with the key people that I run into in the school, but also the school in itself in San Diego was actually pretty good, in my opinion, as far as the instructors and the people there who really care about their students, stuff like that. So I really benefited from that all the way to the point where after I graduated, I actually came back and started teaching there as well. And I spent roughly around more than 5 years teaching in there. So so that and working at Sony PlayStation was my experience mostly within my career. And working at Sony too, I happened to meet Steve Meim at some point when we were doing some support with students. And I didn't realize Steve was actually working not too far from the building that I was working at. So that was an interesting thing to run into Steve. And Steve, as far as you know, I mean, this is something that we kind of segue into since then, that we've just stayed, connected and exploring other things and helping people out too. So Steve, maybe a little quick intro about yourself too.
Yeah, absolutely. And with regards to background, just like you, I've been playing video games ever since I was a kid, going to arcades, playing games like Galaga. My first video game console was the original Nintendo Entertainment System, so playing Super Mario and Duck Hunt. But unlike you, I didn't even realize that working in video games was a possible career path. I kind of discovered it by accident, right? So getting out of high school, I was just taught, hey, you go to school so you can get a job and you can pay bills for 40 years of your life, that type of thing. And after school, I just my original thought was that I was going to be an accountant. So I studied accounting. And then after 2 years of that and, dealing with spreadsheets, my mind was completely fried. And I was like, I can't handle this. I don't understand how people can do it.
Yeah.
So I bounced around from job to job to job, like doing random things like retail and food services and selling life insurance and stuff like that. And it wasn't until I was actually introduced to an opportunity by my brother-in-law. So he found a testing role, so testing video games at PlayStation. He found that on Craigslist of all places. And he applied, he got hired on, and then he went to me and he said, hey, Steve, you love games so much, you should give this a shot. So he helped kind of coach me, get my first interview. And I must admit that first day that I was on the job, I had a controller in my hand and I realized like I'm getting paid to play video games. That's where I fell in love with the industry. And I was like, you know what, I don't care what it takes, but this is what I want to do for the rest of my life as a profession. So starting off, my first title was NBA 06 The Life for the PlayStation 2. So that's how far back my career goes. And yeah, it was one of those things where like I didn't even care that I was just getting paid, minimum wage, because I was like, you know what, I would much rather be doing this than slaving over a hot stove or getting robbed at gunpoint, which is something that happened to me during my career.
Oh, jeez. Oh man.
But that's one of those things where that you never know where life's going to take you. So I finally found this thing that I absolutely love to do. And from there, I was like, okay, being a tester, this is awesome. And then after doing that for about 5 years, I realized that it's great to be in the industry, but I realized that that wasn't the end point, because starting off as a tester, a lot of times you're just making minimum wage, and there are things that I like to do outside of work, such as paying bills and being able to eat healthy food. So I was like, okay, well, I need my career to evolve somehow where I can build a skill set that pays me accordingly. So, fortunately, I was able to transition to more of the business development side. So, I transitioned from game testing to production management, production coordination, and things of that nature. So, fortunately, I
Uh,
was able to find a role at San Diego studio, which happened to be right across the street from where I was working
uh,
before, and I turned that into my career for the next 10 years or so of my path. And that's where I was helping behind the scenes. I wasn't doing any of the creative work myself, but I was helping essentially run the business and to deal with
mhm.
the programmers and designers, artists and producers within the studio and help them get the things that they need in order to do their job effectively. And then while I was doing all of this, the pandemic happened, and I kind of had a
Oh,
conversation with myself, and I was like, okay, well, what? How do I want my career path to move forward? And I noticed that I was something that I really found that brought me fulfillment was helping people in their careers, right? Because people would come and ask me, so how did you get into the video game industry? And I had to reflect back on like what were all of the things? Like was it just luck, or was there some skill involved, or was it a combination of both? So when I thought about how do I want my career to evolve, I was like, okay, well, I like helping people. So I was like, okay, well, there's this role called recruiter that you can actually do where you're helping people get hired onto a company. And then I wanted to do that so I could see from the other side of the hiring table, like what is it that recruiters and hiring managers actually look for when they decide to hire someone on. So after PlayStation, I found my first role in recruiting at a company called Onward Play, which is an agency. So it's like a third party agency that helps companies on one end, and then they find candidates on another end, and they help matchmake. So I was working there for a little bit, and then I transitioned from Onward Play to a place called Riot Games. You may know them for League of Legends. And then from there,
yes.
I transitioned to the most recent place that I worked, which is called Jogo, which is an indie company, and they make video games within Fortnite. So by me going to all of these different places, being able to see what's it like to recruit from an agency perspective versus a AAA developer perspective, and then from an indie perspective, I wanted to gather all of this information so that I can share it with you, the audience, the fans who wants to work in video games. And what do you know? That's what I'm here to do.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean that's what the state of how things are going here as far as like, how the industry is and where do you fall in as far as whether it be triple A or indie or even double A too, as for as some people are mentioning as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, thank you for talking about that. I think leading on to what that topic is as far as how we got into that industry, it does take some it does take some steps to really get into that. I mean, obviously, one of the things that we both had in common is just being inspired to be in this industry, really wanting to get into there and figuring out ways of how and where do we fit in as far as being part of what that industry is. And there's a lot of avenues that we can take. And these are one of the topics that we're probably most likely going to discuss later on down the line. But I think from the experiences that we have, and also from experiences that we've even, have other people shared with. I know you, Steve, you've talked to a lot of people. You have your network. I have my network. We've talked to a lot of people, and we want to really go in there and dig in to see where people are coming from as far as like whether they're in AAA, whether indie, or in between, right? And even more so, even the folks that are just going into college, the ones that are still inspiring to really go into the industry, want to maybe talk with those people too and see how they're doing and maybe help and offer some guidance as well. And I know, Steve, I think you've been doing some of that stuff. I mean, most of the time, right? I think you've been talking to a lot of people. I believe you're doing some mentorship as well. I've been doing mentorship with businesses and stuff like that, and a few students recently.
Yeah. So just chatting with people, like part of it is that was one of the things that opened my mind to appreciating helping other people within the industry kind of get their foot in the door with regards to turning it into a career. And that was one of those things where when we were working at PlayStation, I mean, it's cool to see your name scroll down in the credits on a game that millions of people are
Yeah.
playing. But when I started helping people kind of get their foot in the door, when somebody comes to me and says with a genuine joy that they got their first role, that provides an amount of fulfillment that I can't get any other way. So I was like, wow, if I can get paid to do this, that's such an awesome feeling to have.
Awesome.
And it was one of those things where it was like, okay, well, what can I do? How else can I be of service? So mentoring people, absolutely, that's something that I do. Doing speaking engagements, whether it's at colleges, universities, high schools, conferences, for game development groups. If I can take some of my experience and use it to provide value to anybody else and help kind of be their career GPS, it's super fulfilling. And it's like, man, all I have to do is kind of share from my experience, and people are gaining so much value from that. It's like, why wouldn't I do this? So yeah, it's just like one step at
Yeah.
a time, one conversation at a time, and then you never know who you're going to impact. And when you spread good out into the world, I've found that it has a way of finding its way back to you.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we're going to discuss later on is what is it those paths you need to take as far as the career goes, right? We've been exposed, and I for that matter, I mean, some of us were actually part of it, right? But being in that industry and understanding how that works, um, we have some. I mean, for me and you for that matter too, Steve. We have some insights as far as how that goes as well. Um, and yeah, we can lead on to that in the next segment. But for now, I think for the fact that how we got in was it has some. I would say there back then there wasn't much of a struggle at some point because of the fact that the industry at that point was a bit in sort of how can we say it in a more of a loose fashion to some degree. I mean, there were some establishments made as far as how the careers are set and things like that, but it was still kind of in a loose way where if you do pretty well and you do well with interviews and all that stuff, and you don't have that much experience, that you do have some possibility or some chances of really getting in there, at least talking and getting an interview. This day and age now, that's a little bit different now. I think the landscape's totally changed. Something that we want to start making discussions about and making sure that people understand what is it that they have in store, especially for the new people getting into this industry, is just understanding what are those challenges are going to be for you in this current age, because things have definitely taken a turn to some degree, and that's something that we want to make people aware. I'd hate to have people who are very jaded about getting in the industry and being excited is good. Being having that passion is great now, but the fact that there are challenges, that's something we want to make like light of and be able to help guide you to the proper way of getting to that point is something that we want to share with most of you out there who's trying to get in. Um, on the parallel side of things too, we want to talk to some industry people who've been laid off or are still having a struggle to find other positions. That's something that we want to maybe talk about as well, and figure out what is it that could be alternatives or other ways of getting back in the industry if need be. So there's a lot of things that we can toss around as far as these topics go. But that's something that I'm looking forward to having in our podcast, is just to have these discussions and talk about things and maybe learn a few things from our guests that we'll have later on in some other podcasts as well. As far as like, I think we've already discussed most of the stuff that we've, as far as like how we got in the industry and things like that. The one thing that we probably didn't mention, like what type of games, we like playing. Um, for me, it's mostly because I mean, I was initially, even before I worked at PlayStation, I was a big PlayStation fan. So I've been playing a lot of PlayStation games. The first, I think the first PlayStation game I played was really the launch title for PS1, which is the um, Battle Arena Toshinden. I don't know if you know that title. Steve, if you know that, but that was the first one I actually started playing because that was the first time I ever bought for PlayStation. It was actually it was a fun game. It was like a fighter game. It's a 3D fighter game, right? And it really opened up even more so about how the hardware is. It's like it was sort of a leap in some ways, coming from playing a Nintendo SNES or even um or Sega, or Sega Master System or whatever. It was sort of like this change in the hardware and the graphics that got that really really pushed me forward into getting more into games now, because it was just uh how can I say it was like a further boost for me to get into the industry now because I saw after seeing that. And I know for you, Steve, you got in more so. I think you said your first console was the what was it?
Nintendo.
The Nintendo,
Yeah.
right? So you were kind of were you? I mean, do you agree with me? Was it sort of like that? Or what was your first title that when you played to really, or like what your favorite title is, and what kind of type of games you play?
Gotcha. So, with regards to games that I play, I'm all across the board. Like any sort of genre that you can
Yeah,
think of, I've played it and enjoyed it thoroughly, whether it's RPGs or fighting games or adventures or platformers or side scrollers, like all of them. I've played some of the oldest games you've heard of or games you've never heard of across all platforms, PC, console, arcade games, mobile games. Yeah, I'm all over the
yeah,
place, right? That's one of those things where you can
yeah,
find amazing games anywhere. I mean, even board games, right? Like analog, old
yeah.
school. But that's one of those things where if you had to ask what's my favorite game, like the one that's probably most impactful for me, it would be Street Fighter 2. That was the one that I played endlessly, endlessly, endlessly when I originally got that for the Super NES at the time. And yeah, that was one of those things where understanding the value of putting time and effort into honing a craft or to really get good at something that helped me not just on a personal level with regards to just enjoyment, but also realizing that if I put time into something and practice at it, I can beat a ton of people. For example, my brother, who's 4 years older than I am, like he was always my rival slash, the boss. And when I realized that I could beat him like nonstop, that was one of those things. Where it was like, oh, okay, I see that there's a parallel between time and effort put into something and then being successful at it, where age doesn't matter or size doesn't matter. It's like how much you can devote yourself to that craft. So, yeah, that was one of those things where
Yeah,
it opened my mind to the further possibility that, oh, okay, if I really want to get good at working in video games, then I have to figure out what are the skill sets that I need to kind of perfect from there. So part of this is like, for me, you asked favorite games. So those are the video games, and then finding out that the skills that I learn in video games actually apply to real life. So in a way, like if you think that this is a matrix and that life is a game, like that's the ultimate game that I'm playing.
right. The life game is what it is, right?
Yeah,
So.
absolutely.
So I think one of the things too, because the battle arena decision for me was sort of like the further boost. I mean, you mentioned Street Fighter. Street Fighter was a thing for me too at the time, and it was ooh, the story I have for you is like when I first saw Street Fighter, I was working at an arcade. I was working at an arcade called Tilt up in Plaza Bonita in San Diego, and when we got that arcade machine, just Street Fighter 2, this is when it first came out. I mean, we had it in the back, right? We didn't bring it out in the floor yet, and we were just playing that thing like 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 we didn't care. Like we just started playing. It's, oh my god, this game's really good. We just kept playing, and obviously we got in trouble for playing too much of it in the back room, but it was a sign of like, hey, man, this is gonna be really big. Like later on down the line, once we get out on the floor, people playing it, people are like lining up, it was just getting really big. And I was thinking back, that kind of itch of being able to play a fighting game actually started even further then. I don't know if you remember the game Karate Champ.
Yeah, yeah. That was that they had that in the arcade and then also on the Nintendo, right?
Yeah, and that was competitive as well. I remember when I was playing Karate Champ, kids were lining up and putting quarters on just to fight the next person that, after one person lose. That was the trend that started. I think started it all in the US. I know it probably in Japan's a little bit different, but in the US, as far as I know, Karate Champ was a thing, and then it kind of eased down a little bit, and then Street Fighter came out, and now it really blew up. So I think that trend really pushed it forward when Street Fighter came out, and then that whole 2D fighting genre just kept going at that point. So so it's interesting to hear you say that, because yeah, I was kind of part of that whole Street Fighter fan base as well. Being going into the like I went into an actual Street Fighter tournament that was being held in one of the malls in I think it was in the UTC at some point. There was an arcade called the Yellow Brick Road, and they would have like um, scheduled tournaments in Street Fighter, and I happened to be in one of the tournaments. They're one of their flagship tournaments, and I didn't do well. There was a lot of good players, obviously, so I'm not a pro player for anything, but I was a big fan of playing it. But yeah, that was definitely a thing. And then, yeah, Steve, I know you're part of that too, so that's great that that you mentioned that.
Yeah, and it's crazy to see how far that has evolved with regards to worldwide tournaments, esports, and
Yeah.
even these days, I hear that that esports will be a part of the Olympics. So to see how the
Gosh.
industry has evolved over the years, and then to think how it's going to progress even in the future, it blows my mind, and that's why I have so
I,
much faith for people that want to work into the industry, because it's no longer just about game development, right? You can be a streamer, you can be an esports athlete, you can
yeah.
be a blogger, you can be a streamer where somebody literally pays to watch you play video games. And that's why I'm more optimistic that even though the industry, like as developers, there's some changes there, that part of it mean I understand that the industry is not going anywhere, right? Like there's going to be so many
Mhm.
different ways of turning your passion for gaming into a career. The big thing is like, how do you as an individual, how do you see it evolving, and like figuring out what are the things that are important within yourself and how to make that career happen.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Cool. We're gonna move on to our next segment, so just hang tight. You're listening to Pixel Cultura. Okay, let's talk about the current state of the industry at this point. The game industry right now. I mean, there's a point in time where things sort of kind of leveled off a little bit. We've had so many games coming out, um, and it's becoming a point where which ones are much more successful, which ones can be, and what is it that's going to make money out of them. Now, one of the things that I'm starting to notice a lot more of is how corporations handle video games, and in some ways, it's almost similar to how the film industry is actually creating. I mean, was actually going. I mean, like going as far as their business models go. And it's funny because of the fact that there was people quoting saying that the video game industry is much more profitable than the film industry, which maybe, I mean, that could be because of the fact that the audience is much more spread across, and it has a really huge reach and things like that. But with that said, there's a lot of things that culminated in the past years that kind of brought it to this state currently in 2025. And obviously, one of the things that we've been seeing lately is that there's a lot of shift and changes in the business models, and most of the time when it comes with businesses and with privately or with publicly owned companies, is that um, they would tend to do restructuring of the workforce, which means laying people off, um, and restructuring how their business works based on on a lot of different factors. The biggest factor is, from what we're hearing now lately, as of the time of this recording, is AI, and that's something that is, in my opinion, is sort of a bubble that's growing at some point that would eventually pop. So um, it's one of those things where we can have these deep conversations of what that involves, but the fact of the matter is there's a lot of people being affected about these layoffs, and people who are really passionate about video games having to go in there. It does sour it a little bit to the fact that this kind of thing exists, the way these businesses work and the way they churn out titles and things like that. There's a lot of titles out there that are money makers, and obviously the biggest one that's up in the horizon right now is Grand Theft Auto 6. Is that right? 6 GTA. And
Hmm.
it's definitely a huge mover. I mean, that thing. I mean, whenever they say a release date for that game, all other titles needed to move around it, right? Because they don't be affected by the huge audience that's looking at Grand Theft Auto when it releases. So it's a very major title, and even with that title itself is being affected by a large company, publicly owned, and things like that. To this day, too, there is an article about some people being affected by layoffs in Rockstar, which is interesting to hear. There's some factors to that too, but of course, there's other things. If you read articles about it, you'll see that there's different factors that people are arguing about at this point. But I mean, I want to talk about this topic with you, Steve, about how that is about this industry. It's gotten a bit rough. I know there's a lot of people. If you go into LinkedIn right now, the recent layoffs with Microsoft was a big major one. But on top of that, there are still more additional people before that is still affected. I mean, they haven't found jobs yet. They haven't found positions yet. I'm wondering, Steve, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So with regards to the industry is absolutely enormous. My understanding is that video games as an industry is bigger than movies and music
Hmm.
combined. So just to kind of give an example of how much money there is within video games, there's tons. And with regards to the changes that are going on, I think part of this is zooming out and understanding that it's not a video game thing, it's just a business thing, right? And with business, things evolves, tastes change, different technologies come in and disrupt, and AI is definitely one of those technologies. And you did mention that it is you seeing it as a type of a bubble, and in some respect, I do agree, because think about what are the other kind of bubbles that have
Hmm.
happened recently with regards to like Web3, or what are the other things out there like
Yes.
cryptocurrency, things like that. um, my understanding, though, is that as these technologies kind of come into play, they become like the sexy thing to talk about, and a ton of people will jump on it. And a lot of them will fail because there's so much emphasis on like, oh, it just makes money, and that's how people kind
Yeah.
of jump into it. And then when they realize it's not like a get rich quick scheme, then they'll fall off naturally. But I believe the tool is useful, and it's not that it's a bad thing. It's just like we're still figuring out how to use
Yes.
it the right way. An example of this is like the internet. There was a time where people thought the internet was a fad,
Right.
and some people were downplaying it like, oh yeah, like who would want to go online and purchase things when you could just go to a store that's 5 minutes away? And yeah, we see how that
Yeah.
has evolved, right? Now so many people are doing their shopping online, and a lot of companies did kind of invest heavily in that and then fall off. It's just because that's the nature of business in general. So with regards to I see that it's brand new. Like this has only been around for a few years, and it's going to level off some way somehow. Now, exactly when that's going to happen, I'm not sure, but my feeling is that AI isn't itself going to take over, but the people that know how to use AI, that is, those are the people that are going to progress and really excel because it's a tool set that's available. And I'm sure you've seen how using certain things like Chat GPT can really speed
Yes.
up your workflow, right? As a creative who knows the behind the scenes, you've seen how it can take some of those pipelines and
Yeah.
really shorten them. So, with your expertise, that's one of the reasons why I'm confident that you know how to do it. But somebody who's going to come in and think that, oh, they're going to graduate from high school and then magically, because Chat GPT, they can type in a prompt that is going to solve all their problems, they're in for a
Yeah.
rude awakening. So that's kind of my perspective with regards to AI. And then with the industry as a whole, um, I see that just like in business, things are shifting. So the industry is huge and is going to remain huge. The thing is, the opportunities are showing up in other places. And I kind of touched on this a little earlier that it may not be AAA where that's the moneymaker, right? There are other opportunities, for example,
Hmm.
UGC or user generated content, where there are people that are making games within games. So, like people making games within Fortnite, and they're so successful that they're able to take the money that they're earning and fund an entire studio just within that ecosystem. So, things like that, things like playing video games and becoming an esports athlete, things like being a streamer. Those are other ways of using your passion for video games and turning it into a career where it may not be developing it, but there's still very viable ways of making
Yeah.
a living doing it.
Yeah. I think going back to the AI side of things, and you did touch on some really good points, which I do agree on. I think one of the things that with AI and the public knowledge and the public perception of what AI is always, and I keep hearing this, is that they think it's going to take away jobs, that it's going to replace a lot of people. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do think that maybe even for the high level C-suite people, they believe that. And that's the wrong thing. That's the wrong mindset to have if you're not even aware of what AI is. And I think one of the things that we want to maybe straighten out, I'm hoping we get this straightened out soon, is to remove that the stigma, this, what do you word that? Like a stigmatic, I guess is there a word for that? Where people, when you hear AI, you think it's going to take people away, right? It sounds like that. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
really that exactly. I mean, what it is a tool. And we keep saying it's a tool, right? It's not going to be there to replace everything. It's going to be there to help you be efficient, help you with things, to get things done. I think that's that's the big takeaway for me as far as using AI. But you have to be an expert on it, right? It's like saying oh, I got this special hammer that could help, build houses. But I'm not going to be a guy who doesn't know how to create a house to use a hammer to make a house. You need the experts to really know how to do that. So it's a tool, right? If the experts know how to use a tool, you let the experts use it. But if you're a person who thinks that I can make these prompts and make a really good movie out of it, and I don't, I never went to film school. I don't know how to make movies, but the AI can do it for me. It's like that is not the approach you're going to take, and that's not the mindset you should have. And I think a lot of people still have that. And into this day, I looked into this too. Like, could I be able to do something like that by just with prompts? And I look at that, it's like, no. I mean, most of the results that I get, especially when it comes to getting artwork, it's just not. It doesn't get what I want. With an artist's eye, you know what you want, right? When other people see it, though, when you're not really an artist, you don't have the eye for it, and you look at it, and it looks good enough. That's a different judgment, right? It's a different perspective of what you're going with if you're not an expert on it. And I think that's where it's getting lost at this point. And just really to throw this out here too, I'm seeing a lot of people online who are becoming, oh, how can I say it? They're becoming a little bit more sensitive about people doing art and showing it off and social media. And I don't know if you've seen this before, Steve, but I've seen artists getting stigmatized on their artwork that they show being accused of using AI. And sure, there are people that do that, right? Um, but now it came to a point where how do you know, right? I mean, there are going to be some telltale signs, obviously, But what if there is an artist that actually does a really good job, and then for some reason, for that matter, like a person in the internet, maybe a random person, will accuse them of being AI, and then now it becomes this sort of witch hunt of people getting accused. And now this day and age, people have to literally record their art, them creating the art to prove that they created, with their own hands, by themselves, not by AI, which is sad. I hate to see this happening, but I keep seeing a lot of conversations and a lot of people on social media just throwing that out there. And what's sad is that social media, it really feeds on negative, right? It feeds on the negative, attention, stuff like that, and it grows. And I think that's the one thing that a lot of people are starting to cash in on, unfortunately. But yeah, I
Mhm.
think it's AI really is a sensitive topic to talk about, but it's something that we need to have a discussion and clarify about, because I just don't like it being generalized as being it's gonna end people's jobs, it's gonna end people's careers, and the way it looks like right now, I mean, with Microsoft laying people off, the AI reason is in there, and sure, and it is in there, and that's decisions made on the high level that say, yeah, I think AI is going to take care of everything, which is the wrong way to go, in my opinion, and it's the wrong reason. You shouldn't be saying that stuff. So it's unfortunate. Now it's in the headlines, and now people are going to even feed on that and see that as a negative light when it comes to AI now.
Yeah. And I like part of this is if I can bring some experience as a recruiter that kind of parallels with this, I'd like to bring up that's kind of what recruiters do with regards to uh, job resumes, right? Because in a resume, it's essentially
Hmm.
a document. And in order to have a legit resume, like you should have the experiences that your resume talks about, right? But anybody can copy and paste a resume,
Hmm.
right? So as a recruiter, I can have a dozen different people that submit the exact same resume and qualifications and bullet points, but it's up to me as a recruiter to filter through each one of those to see, well, who actually does have the skill, right? And that's part of like going through the interview process is you get to chat with a person and say, oh, I see this stuff that you have in bullet point form. Like, tell me about your experience. Oh, you've created 100 pieces of artwork.
Yeah.
Show me, right? Show me the proof that you've done it. And it's kind of like an arms race where it's um, dishonest people are going to use it to try to scam the people that they're showing it off to, but the legit people, right, they will have the skills. And I mean, it's an unfortunate extra step where, doing a time lapse of you actually creating the artwork, it's that's kind of the price of all of
Yeah.
these things coming out, but this isn't something new. It's something that we've been dealing with all the time, right? Anytime that you see an advertisement, you think like, does can this company actually deliver that? Or is it one of those things where it's like McDonald's where they'll show a beautiful ad of this amazing looking burger, but when you actually go and order it, it's like two pieces of lettuce and some
Yeah.
sad, soggy
Yeah.
hamburger buns. You know what I mean? So this is a challenge that it's nothing new. It's just that with the advent of technology and new things coming out, there are just other things that we as consumers need to keep an eye
Yeah.
out for.
Yeah.
Is that making
It,
sense?
it, it's funny because you can literally tell something is made in AI at this point, and it's becoming the point. And this is one of those things where now how people judge it. Oh, this is all done in CG. Now it's going to be, oh, this is all done in AI, because you can tell, right? It's going to come to that point now because of that. And it's interesting to see public reaction when you see an ad that's made with AI. People are going to say, "Oh yeah, this is made in AI." It's like you can't get away with it. Like if you're like a company that feels like, "Oh, we're just going to use AI to make our ads," people are going to really pick that up. I mean, you don't, no question. And if you're oblivious to that, then I'm sorry, you're setting yourself up for AI reaction for sure. I don't think AI has gotten perfect enough to really hide that at this point. There's always these small telltale signs that it's created in AI. I think that's one of the things that now people are starting to notice and stuff like that. And as far as like how that, as far as what you're saying, yeah, it's been out there for a while. I think one of the things is that AI kind of accelerated that, or kind of like increased the volume of it to some degree. I think to really
Mhm.
show that. I mean, I think it in some ways it kind of created a higher awareness for us now to look out for those kind of for scammers like that, and people that actually utilize technology to fake their way in. So yeah, I mean that's really a touchy thing. As far as like industry though, that poses a really big question for careers and things like that too, and it is challenging to some degree. And one thing that a lot of people are mentioning, and I know some really good people that I know that have been consultants, and they have the right words about it. I think for any person who's in AAA right now, you really have to be aware that the possibility of layoffs is going to happen. And there's no protection at all. And I think it's been there for a while, but some people, like for me, I've been guilty of this too. Like working at Sony for a long time, I did have in the back of my head that at some point, we'll probably get shut down and laid off somewhere. Um, but when it hit hard at that point, um, then you realize, yeah, you're not really protected. Like you can have all the passion and loyalty you have for a company, but like you said, Steve, it is a business and they have to make those kind of decisions, right? It's not because of your performance. It's what the betterment of the business needs to, go through. And when it comes to cutting people off, that's what you're going to do. It's not a reflection of your performance or the department or anything. It's just that, in order to make money, they have to make the cuts. They have to make these adjustments. And that's becoming the norm at this point. There is no way of being protected. And I don't know what that solution would be, whether it be unions or something, but that's what's happening right now.
So with regards to that, I am a huge supporter of CYA, cover your own
Right.
assets. And I started at when I was a video game tester. When I was in that stage of my career, it was all
Hmm.
contract work, right? And I took that mentality and I understood that these contracts, they may not last very long. Some of them were months long, some of them were maybe a year or so, some of them were literally a couple of weeks or even
Yeah.
one day. And that's one of those things where I understood that if I want to get into the industry, that comes with the territory, right? So, in addition to working as a tester, I always had my side gigs where I was like, you know what, I've got something else where if anything happens that is unexpected, I will still be able to pay my bills and take care of all of my requirements, right? And it was a sacrifice that I knew that I had to make because working in video games, it's one of those industries that's extremely glamorous. Like so many
Yeah.
people want to get into it. And because of that, there's that natural like competition where what is it that I'm doing that's going to separate myself from all of the other people that want to work in this industry as well, right? So these are some of the nuances that I learned and how I've helped coach and manage relationships with regards to, okay, if you want to get into the industry, are you sure you want to put up with the sacrifices that are required in order to make that happen, right? And these are some of those things. Understanding the volatility of the industry, where even quote unquote safe jobs may not be as safe
Yeah.
as you think they are, right? So I'm a huge proponent of making sure that you have an extensive amount of savings. That way, if something unexpected happens, that you're not in immediate
Yeah.
emergency mode, right? So that's part of it. Another part of it is the understanding the benefits of networking and making sure that you're building relationships so that if something happens, you'll be able to rely on your network to help you find your next role because you know the importance of having good people in the workplace, right? And the coming from the standpoint of that person from experience versus having to make a judgment on that person based off of a sheet of paper known as their resume, right? Or off of a few social media posts, right? Because the best way to know somebody is to have extensive
Hmm.
interactions with them, right? So these are all things where it's like yes, understanding the business aspect, the volatility, and then what are you doing to prepare for those inevitabilities like
Yeah. I
layoffs
think
and
I
things
think
of
what
that
you
nature?
hit what
Yeah.
hit you hit the point really hard on the one where you just have to know. Like you have to be aware that at some point there is going to be some changes, right? You're gonna it's not like you're going to be there for a long time. And I think that's one of the things like what you mentioned. Working as a contractor, you definitely have a different perspective when you work there, right? Because like you're under contract and at some point the contract's going to end. And when you're there full
Hmm.
time, though, we see people who've been working, more than 10 years or so, and of course, you do take comfort working there long enough to say, hey, maybe I'm good with this company. But even with that, like, there's a lot of people who had a lot of experience that fell into the cutting block, and that's unfortunate. For going into the contract sides, I think, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think your mentality is a little bit different because you already know you only have so much time to work there. And whether or not you're going to continue another contract or not, that's still in question until the very end, right? So there's those kind of mindsets you need to have. And I think now that mindset needs to transfer over to people full time. Because even with full time, in some ways, it's sort of like you're in a contract at this point because there is a limit at this point, and you're going to run into it uh, whether you like it or not, and you have no choice over it. And I'm referring to, I mean, the folks up at EA, uh, they're going private. The EA is going private, correct? So we don't know what the repercussions are going to be, but a lot of people are already saying, restructuring is going to happen. So you definitely need to start changing your mindset of what you need to do if you're really in a good spot. If you feel like you're in a good spot, right? I think that's kind of something that you want to change your mindset and be prepared for it. Like, what was you saying? The CY, what was that you saying?
CYA,
Yeah,
cover
you
your
need to start
assets.
doing that for sure. That
Yeah.
that's that's the
Yeah.
biggest that's the biggest takeaway, I think.
Yeah. And like I know it can be very doom and gloom to see it at that from that perspective. For me, I understand that there's going to be a some amazing opportunities that happen because of that, right? Because these AAA companies, they may be getting bloated and becoming too stagnant, not being able to take risks, and they're laying people off. So one, they're shooting themselves in the foot, and for better or for worse, right? They're they're making their bed and they got
Yeah,
to sleep in it, right? They're losing all of this talent. But one of the things that I can appreciate is that because of these things happening, some amazing things will result of it from these things burning down, right? In nature, it's kind of like when a forest burns down, but that means that the life can
yeah,
renew, that more like seedlings will get planted and then they will flourish afterwards, right? It's just a natural process of kind of nature. And there's so many examples of this. Like, for example, the birth of PlayStation, right? Originally, it was supposed to be Sony and Nintendo collaborating together in order to make this awesome console, but last minute that deal broke up, and then PlayStation went out and did their own thing, and then they created this entire like new
yeah,
console, right? And because of that deal breaking up, you have something amazing at the end. Now, you may not have been able to foresee that when it happened, but looking in retrospect after 25, 30 years, it's like, oh, okay, now I
mhm,
can see it. Right. And I think it's going to be the same way where 5, 10 years from now, we're going to look back at this time of, oh, look at all of those companies having layoffs. But because of that, there's going to be some brand new studios that pop up because all of this available talent, they're going to be like, screw these big companies. Let's form our own and do our own thing where they make awesome games, where it's a sustainable lifestyle, where they're able to treat the employees accordingly and make
yeah,
an awesome product that the fans are going to love. Now, how that's going
yeah.
to happen, I don't know, but I have faith because of the industry and the way that it is
Well,
that
here's
it's
the thing
going to
that's going to
happen.
happen, that needs to happen, and you're right. There should be some changes happening in response to what's happening now. One of the things that's going to need to change at some point is the business sense of making a game to make a lot of money. And I think
Hmm.
that's all sudden good because yeah, you wanna have that bottom line. You want to have the profits. You want to make a lot of money out of it. The problem is that video games really start off as really more passion than anything. And there was
Yeah.
no thought of, oh yeah, I'm gonna make a lot of money on this, right? No, I just want to make a game that's fun. Right? So it's like
Yeah.
a lot of people back then when they made their games, they thought the game was fun and they shared it and they didn't want to sell it. And when other people agreed it's fun, it made money. A lot of people started buying it. It wasn't the intention that, oh, I'm making this game so I can make a lot of money. No, it wasn't that at all. It's really just making a game that you want, that you believe as a group or as a person, a developer, that it's fun and I want to share it with the rest of the world. If it makes money, yeah, that's great. I mean, everyone agrees that's fun. But when it comes to like the other approach where you're making something and you're following other games, that has that same makeup, like you're copying another game that was successful and hoping that your version is going to make more money. That's starting to get a little bit too redundant now. Like, unfortunately, we have so many MMOs out there, right? That's trying to follow the same
Hmm.
formula. But time and time again, we see a lot of the companies, a lot of the groups. I forget which one, the recent one that just got um, shut down and had a it had a really prospective developer that's doing it. But there's been so many MMOs that just lost funding or got canceled because it wasn't making enough money. It wasn't potential enough to make enough money. But in the same time, they're making a MMO that's fun, right? But that didn't count. That didn't count
Hmm.
at all. And it's sad because another thing too is just saturation as well. I mean, there's so many things going on. There's other factors. But when it comes to the fact that you want to make a fun game, a fun video game, and you want it to be successful, that's the first and foremost thing that should happen, right? Whether or not it's going to make money, that's probably secondary. Otherwise, if you're going to go to that route, I mean, obviously you want to, you know, make money to support yourselves and the people making the game too, but it needs to have that sort of factor as a concentration to what you're going to do for developing games. The corporate way is obviously what it is, right? If it's successful enough, it gets a lot of
Hmm.
units sold, then it's good, and yeah, it's fun as well. It's like the afterthought, right? That didn't really matter. It's
Hmm.
as long as it made enough money. And then now the whole thing back then about making service, live service games is another thing, right? Where it makes more money. And and even with
Hmm.
that, the route they took with that didn't do so well as well. Because um, there's loss of focus. There's a loss of whether or not the game is good. Um, they just cared about whether or not it reaches the audience and it sells enough units to make that money and and meet the quota at some degree, right? So it's really sad it came to that, and I think maybe we should go more down to the grassroots of things of how games are made. And I mean, I gotta say, a lot of indies are still doing that, of course. You know, sadly to say though, Steam has so many games in there, it's hard to swim through that and get the attention because a lot of people are throwing other stuff in there that's getting more promotions. And I don't know, there's a game there's a little game you gotta play to get yourself in Steam and get yourself recognized too, which is interesting to know once you start thinking about that. So um yeah, I think from what you said, yeah, changes are going to happen, and whether or not the mindsets of creating games may change, or maybe the indie side of things might grow a little bit more. Because I think more now that the indies are making a better example of creating fun games, and then it makes money, it makes sense. And I think it's not the fact that a corporate, council or whatnot would decide on that. So those could change and those could shift, and we'll see how that goes, in the coming years, and see whether or not that landscape changes. As far, oh, go
One
ahead.
of the things that
No, no, go ahead.
oh, go ahead. I was going to say one of the things that I appreciate about understanding the business side of this, or some of it, is that there are so many audiences that are hungry for a certain type of game. And this is where the opportunities for indie developers to come in and understand like what are the nuances of that ideal customer and to be able to serve that. And I can see like a lot of parallels with, video games and the
Hmm.
restaurant industry, right? Like there's a time and place for every type of food that's served, right? Whether it's a certain style of food that you like, a certain like sometimes you need something just that's just quick and dependable. Sometimes you need a full sit down like hour 2 hour long experience where you have the best food and the best drinks. And sometimes it's like a I need food for a ton of people, or sometimes it's just myself. Video games is very much the same way with regards to like there's so many audiences out there that are excited to spend money on what it is that they want to spend on. And there's a huge pool for developers to come in and figure out a way to create for that specific audience and find ways to do it in a sustainable way. So that's just one of those things where it's easy to focus on like the big corporations and what are they doing. Those are like the chains. That's like the Pizza
Hmm.
Hut and the McDonald's, right? Where it may not be the best food, but like there is a time and a place for that type of food, right? Whereas if you want like a full 40-hour single player experience, there's a way of getting that in there
Yeah.
too, right? So part of it is like, can you make that game that people are going to be interested in? And then how are you going to separate yourself from all of the other
Hmm.
ones, right? So that's part of it is not only making the game, but how do you put it in a way where the right people will find out about that? And I think that's a creative challenge that it's
Yeah.
out there, right? Like, and there's so many different ways that you can get your game released, whether it's on Steam or whether it's on console. And that's part of the challenge is like once you know that you want to make a game, like you can't ignore the business aspect of it, right? Because you have to collect money somehow from the player because that's how you're going to
Right.
sustain the
Right.
game developers, right? And unless all of the game developers just want to work completely for free, you have to figure out like where is that
Yeah.
money going to come in, right? And how do you find the right people that will pay for it? So it's an interesting challenge, and yeah, I look forward to kind of going deeper into some of those tangents
Yeah.
as we
I think I
progress.
think I think one of the things you mentioned about is, yeah, audience is another thing too that we want to, the business or at least developers want to focus on is like, who is this audience that you're making for? Is it going to be very interesting for that audience? And do you fall within that audience like interest to really make that possible? This is definitely a topic to discuss even further about that. But yeah, I think of those things that you mentioned, I think that that's one of the things that those kind of understandings we definitely want to explore and dig in and figure things out. I think moving forward is like when these businesses start popping up, when we start having indie developers getting even better, there's that in between, like the double A as well, right? That's starting to surface a little bit more. So, what is it that's going to involve about getting a career and what that entry path is going to be? And that's definitely going to be our next topic coming forward. So, um, let's move on to that. So, for those of you who just joined us, you're listening to Pixel Kultura. Let's talk about careers and entry paths. In the previous segment, we were talking about the state of the industry and what companies or what new companies may pop up after that, after aftermath of things. And we were looking into what that possibility is about, like, getting support and what that funding is too. That's a little bit of a topic that's worth talking about. But one of the things that really um, concerns me is, what about the new people? What about the people who are still going to college, in hopes that they can get into the industry, and what paths they can take? And I know that there are a few in college are taking programs that are focused on taking, a path, a career path in those programs, and whether it be art, whether it be programming. The other things that they don't really get taught on is the business of video games, and I think that's a really big topic that they should understand, because once you know how things are run in the business of video games, you may understand that maybe there are other avenues, there are other paths you can take, Because I do feel, and take it from me, I worked at the Art Institute for a while, and I understood what their business model is, and it's very ugly to be frank. Working at the Art Institute, it's a for-profit company, and of course, they care about bottom line. They didn't care about students, right? So I think one of the things that we were unable to control is what that curriculum and what this is for students to really understand what the game industry is. We were training students to be able to be artists or programmers, or even we had an audio track as well. So we were training people to get into audio, but but I felt like the program itself wasn't as um, it wasn't enough to really teach or train the students to understand what that business is about. And I think that's an important thing that people going forward start learning what that is. And this day and age now, I mean, we got so many resources available to find that out. But this is definitely a topic we can talk about and just toss around to figure out, give people an understanding of what is involved that's going to be um, possible for that newcomer to come in and jump into that industry. Obviously, the skills is a big thing, right? If you're coming into the industry, you still need to develop the skills to be able to get into it. You can't really have that. And then there's also the experience that most of you who do not have experience, as far as like junior roles and things like that, the availability of that's another issue that we're gonna maybe talk about. Um, One of the things that maybe we can start looking into is what is it that those entry paths could be. And Steve, do you have any insights on that by any chance?
With regards to ways of getting into the industry, I mean, there are so many ways of doing it. I really, the starting point that I like to use with regards to talking to anybody in their career path, I like to use a framework to start off with. So the framework that I like to use is something called Ikigai. That's
Ikigai.
Ikigai. It's a Japanese philosophy that kind of helps you figure out what is your purpose in
Hmm.
life, right? Now, I know that may not be career specific, but if you listen, it'll kind of fill in the blanks. So, Ikigai is a philosophy that talks about how do you figure out your life's purpose. And I find that a career is very much a part of what is important to a
Yes.
person as they progress through life. And the Ikigai is it's a an intersection of four different concepts, right? So the first concept is passion. Like, what is your
Hmm.
individual passion? People have their own like topics that they're passionate about, whether it's gaming, whether it's artwork, whether it's
Right.
programming, right? So those types of things, like you have to be honest with what are the things that genuinely bring you joy, right? Something that you love so much you do it every day for free, right? So that's with regards to passion. The other aspect is what are you good at? Because not only are there things that you love to do, but there are also things where somehow you may have like an innate tendency towards being good at something, right? Like, some people that have an artistic eye, or they're extremely logical and programming comes naturally to them. Some people are athletes. Some people are excellent with working face to face with other people, right? So finding out what is it that you love to do, right? And then what is it that you are naturally skilled at or skills that you can develop, right? To be some of the best in the world. The third aspect is what is something that the world needs, right? Because when you love something and you learn how to do it and you find people that need it, now you have an audience to serve, right? It's something where you're not doing it just for your own sake, but you're able to help other people some way, somehow with what it is that you love to do and something that you're good at. And then the fourth aspect is what can you make money doing, right? Because if you have an audience, if you can't make money doing it, then it's not a
Yeah.
career, it's a hobby, right? So finding what is it about you that you love to do, something that you can be really good at, something that people need and that people will pay you for. So finding those four things is like the framework. And I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind, because understanding that the world changes, right? Because let's take it a career path now, such as streamer, right?
Yeah.
Professional streamer. I couldn't say that I want to be a professional streamer when I was a kid because streaming didn't exist, right? But I knew that I had a passion for video games. That's why later on in my career, when I figured out, oh, I can actually make money doing this, that started to point me in the right direction. So it's one of
Actually,
those things where those having that framework will allow you to follow a career path where it's not necessarily saying I want to do this one thing because that one thing may not exist when you're ready to get into a job or a few years down the line,
yeah.
if that makes sense, right? So that's how I want to kind of start it off with finding out what are those things for you and then use that to guide your pathway. Because as of right now, some of the ways of getting into the industry are the traditional like programmer, designer, artist, tester, but there are new things that are opening up, such as streamer, such as esports athlete, such as
Yes.
community manager, right? Social media manager. And that's one of those things is like it's kind of like hitting a moving target, but just as long as you're true to yourself with regards to the ikigai, I think that's going to be a great starting point.
Yeah.
Is that making sense?
Yeah, that's totally clear on that. I mean, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to understand. I mean, really more so the understanding where you're coming from, what the essence of what you like doing, what is that you are good at is a big thing too, right? Not to forego what
Mm-hmm.
you already know, like well, what is it that you like to do, what is it, all that stuff, but it's something that you want to at least understand coming from your inner self of what that is. Not having someone dictate that to you. So that's the thing that I was trying to avoid that when we were teaching in AI, but it really more so. I remember one story I have to share is I had a student at one time and he took me to the side just to talk to me. He wasn't sure, like, why am I having to learn this? And it's like, and that was a weird question to me. Um, and so you're learning this because you decided to take this track on creating art for games. And he told me straight out, that I didn't want to get into making the art. I just want to design games. And it's like, okay, then you shouldn't be in this program. This is not if that's what your passion I'm doing, follow that. Don't go by this program and hope that you get something out of it. I think one of the things that you really, really have to have is the the passion to be able to create art. And if you don't have that and you want to just design, that's a totally different track that, this program will not give you. So, so I gave him that particular advice and, sure enough, he went ahead and dropped and it's a waste of money. You don't want to spend this time and taking a program that you don't like. And it's unfortunate he got talked into taking the program. I wish that didn't happen in the first place, but you got to be truthful for a lot of people, especially when I'm mentoring too. I want to make sure that they understand their inner self as well. Just like what you say, was it the ikigai? Is what you say? Yeah, the ikigai.
Ikigai, yeah.
I'm probably going to use that as well, just to I'll pass it on to some of the people I'm mentoring as well. But yeah, it makes sense. It definitely does make sense.
Yeah. And that's one of those things where like and part of it is understanding that there are so many different skill sets that you can use to work in video games, right? Like if you think of any sort of business skill that's needed, you can be accountants, you can be HR managers, you can be advertisers or marketers, right? These are all things that are very important with regards to the business of making video games. And yeah, that's one of the things that I love to help communicate is because it's not just the game developer aspect that that's part of making the games. Now it's kind of the more glamorized one
Mhm.
because I don't know of any specific like business development programs who work in video
Yeah,
games specifically, right? Usually it's
yeah,
business in general, but now that we're having this conversation, I can kind of spread the word and help guide people in the right direction.
yeah.
If that makes sense.
That's a good thing to really start raising awareness on. Biz dev is really big. It's nice to really learn about what that track is as far as career goes, because that in some ways, if we can get more people in biz dev to understand what this landscape is about and how to really build an infrastructure of how things should work in game development studios, that would be a huge, game changer in my opinion. Because I think one of the things that really would help is to be able to help, you know, developing what that business system is going to be for even for indies too, right? it's very helpful to have
Yeah.
those people specialize in those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I love is communicating how the games you play can kind of help lead you in that
Hmm.
direction. And there are so many like simulator games, like
Yeah.
SimCity, for example, where you're essentially running a city and learning how to budget, learning how to make sure that all of the different areas are funded and how to make sure that everybody's happy while they're doing it. And the skills that you learn with regards to that can be very useful in like there's a real life parallel where as you're learning these skills in a video game, like it actually
Yeah.
translates to real life. And that's one of the things that I love about video games is that you can learn so much and get essentially a college degree without necessarily going through a paid college program. So yeah.
Yeah, somebody should develop, and I know there's some stuff out there. There's like a game dev tycoon game out there. There's like, but
Yeah.
like if you make a serious like game dev simulator to really educate, how that works, that would be interesting to see.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, that's part of the joy of making games and seeing how we can take this passion, gamers everywhere around the world, the things that you love, and learning the skill sets on like how you level up in a game, how you actually have to build your skills. There's such a parallel with regards to that, and then getting into your career, like how do you level up with regards to hard skills and
Hmm.
soft skills, and how do you choose which out of all of the skill trees that you can develop, which
Yeah.
one do you decide? Like if you need to build up experience points, right? That all is a parallel
Hmm.
to real life. So yeah, I love it.
So one thing I probably want to bring up here: do you know any common myths about getting into the game industry or for entertainment, for that matter?
Yeah, I would say one of the myths is that just because I love playing video games, I can make it in the
Mm,
industry, and that is a misconception because part of it is yes, you may love playing video games, but if you're going to turn it into a career, that means somebody's going to be paying you for it. And if somebody's going to be paying you for it, that means you have to be providing them value some way
yeah.
somehow, right? Maybe that value is you're entertaining them,
Hmm.
right? But entertaining somebody with you playing games, there's a nuance between that and you just loving playing
Yeah.
games yourself, right? Because I don't think anybody's just going to want to sit and watch me like literally play. Like I need to interact
Hmm.
with them. I need to have conversations, maybe inspire them somehow. So that's an important nuance to understand where it's not just because you love to play games that you can make a career in it. It's like, okay, well, that's a great starting point. But again, going back
Yes.
to Ikigai, you got to figure out like how do those other three components fall into place. So I think that's probably one of the biggest
Yeah.
myths.
It is like it's an outlying like starting point of where you want to get into. Like, yeah, sure. Everyone who wants to get into the industry likes playing games for sure. Now that's what brings up a question for this is the other side of the spectrum. I've seen people be in the industry and not like playing games, which is kind of interesting to some degree. Because
Yeah.
sure, they're probably good at what they do, right? But they could care less of what the game is about,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of, in my opinion, it's in a way a handicap. Maybe not handicap. I don't know if it's the right term, but you're putting yourself in a place where people have passion about making these things. Like it's like me working
Mm-hmm.
in a tire company. And I hate all this process of making tires, but I know how to help things get organized, right? If you go into
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that, then you're kind of putting yourself in a situation where you're working in a place you hate to be in. It's like you need to be in a
Yeah.
place where you feel like you're part of it and you feel like you partake in what they make and have a passion. You share the passion with them on making it. I think
Yeah.
that's a really better takeaway than being in a place where you don't like the stuff that they're making, right? Or you don't even care about playing games because that's what they're making. But I mean, surprising, there are people that exist out there, and I'm sure they do well
Yeah.
on what they do, but um, in the long run, it may not be good for them as far as like being part of the work culture, as far as I understand. But again, to each his own, and maybe they do work out, but I think it's a better plus when someone's really passionate about games. And like I said, going back to this, everyone who wants to be in the industry, loves to play games in some degree. And I think that matters a lot every single time. But from there, you need to take the extra steps. There's extra steps involved to get into that, right? And like the Ikigai is a definite model to follow to understand where you need to go or where you fit in on this industry and how you want to jump into it. And oh yeah, oh go
So
ahead.
what So one of the things that we were talking about with regards to ikigai and people working in a place that they're not passionate about, like by all means, the company will take advantage of that person that is there, that is doing the work and providing value. I think the passion is very important for that individual. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a time and place where maybe if you don't have a job right now, you take up something so you can pay the bills, take care of your family and your responsibilities. Absolutely understand that. But you have to also understand what is the long-term effect
Hmm.
of you doing something that
Yeah.
you're not passionate about. That's like
Yeah.
torture. And I don't want somebody to live through their life feeling that they're tortured and doing it just because they have to, just because out of
Yeah.
duty or responsibility, right? I want you to have a life that you can enjoy. And I think that's where you have to be honest with yourself about that passion part, because sometimes the passion can evolve, right? Like for me, it started off being passionate about testing video games and then the business aspect. And then later I found the passion for helping people in their careers. So I had to be honest with myself with regards to like, what are the things that I'm enjoying at this moment in my life, because that's something that evolves as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a huge part of it.
For sure. Any other myths that you know of as far as trying to get in?
Ooh, myths with regards to working in games. Yes, that just because I get a degree in something means I'm
Oh,
qualified to do it.
yes.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like it's unfortunate, but yeah, that's not really as important as it
No, it's
used to
not.
be, right? There used to be a time where if you go through a program, they will teach you exactly what you need to know, and then on the day of graduation, you're like, yes, I can do it, and people are gonna fight and hire me
Oh,
just because I got that degree. And something that I've learned is that just because you get a degree doesn't necessarily mean you put in the same amount of work and effort as all of your fellow classmates, right? If you've had a group project, you may be familiar with, some people do a lot of work and others not so much, right? Everybody gets the same grade at the end of the project, but you can see how it's like if you have to decide which one of these group mates you want to work with in a professional level, you may have a decision based off of who is more valuable, who will help do the job, who will make the environment a great place to work, right? Because it's not just about having the technical skills, it's also about like, do I actually enjoy
mm,
working with you? And from my experience working in video games, it's a very
yes.
collaborative
Hmm.
experience, right? Where you're working with so many different disciplines. And if you're doing this 40 plus hours a week, I want to make sure that people that we hire on are ones that fit in with
Yeah.
the culture, right? People that have integrity, people that understand how to have a sense of humor, right? People who know how to handle differences and be respectful just in case there are disagreements, because those disagreements will happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a
Hmm.
matter of when, right? So this is one of those things where it's not just about technical skills, but the soft skills as well. And from my experience, there aren't many like soft skill classes in college, right? They'll teach you
Yeah.
programming 101 and they'll teach you design and networking and stuff like that, but they don't teach you like how to be a good person,
Yeah.
right? And that's something where it's not, if you're just picking it up through like what people do on social media, it can be kind of rough because that isn't always a realistic picture
Yeah.
of what it's like to work in game development. So that would say
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
another myth.
That's a good point to bring up. And it just goes back to the education side of things. And to be frank, now after going through knowing what the business of teaching and being part of vocational college, I would safely say it is not a good path to take. And just for the fact that you're shelling out so much money to learn a new skill, and if you, I mean, this is for even the people that not even sure what they need to do. Like I'd hate to have people shell out or at least get a student loan to learn something that they may not be passionate about or not be interested about to hope to get into the industry. And that's not the path that they should be taking. It isn't. They're getting the wrong guidance. They're going to lose focus. They're going to they're probably seeing negative light on some of the things moving forward in the program. And there's a lot of things that can happen, and you're going to be stuck to it. And it's sad to say that a lot of students that I've seen go through the ringer on their had to go through that, and not be able to benefit from it. It's one of the things that if we had a more stricter way of getting students in and getting them passed through the program, that would make more sense. But unfortunately, we weren't able to do those kind of things. We didn't have that kind of control. That's all done by the manager level. So it's interesting to see now after the aftermath, because with AI, they went through a shutdown because of the fact that there was a scandal. They had there's money investments and things like that. They lost accreditation. I mean, obviously, it made sense to me when that happened, because the way things are being handled and how the programs are being created, it's just a mess. And I think that could be still existing at this point from other colleges. And I really discourage people, if they see a vocational college, and I know some colleges seem fine. I'm not saying that some of them are bad, but it is a point where if you could spend that much money and to learn this kind of thing, you really have to put the research into where you're putting your money in to get that kind of training. And I think one of the things that you should start doing is to focus on what is it that you want to get into, the ikigai again, right? Is to know what is it that you need to learn and focus on doing that. Not take you don't need, and there's accredited schools as well, like universities, are starting to have programs on this too, which is fine and dandy. But, again, you're probably getting subpar education based on the curriculum and based on the staff. If the staff, or at least the professors or whoever is teaching, has a really good background, sure, but then think about the money you're paying on that too, and how you're going to recoup that. Because the student loan thing was that was a big issue as well. And, having kids having to be in debt and not be able to land a job is a serious issue that happened even some years ago too. To this day, I'm still paying my student loans. So I'm almost done actually, but it's been like over like 16 years or so for me to pay it. So it's like, I shouldn't have, if we had the resources back then to really understand how we get in the industry, I probably would be saving money. But, back at that time, we didn't. And I want to make sure people now, because there's so much you can learn now. There's a lot of resources you can get. There's some that are free that you can actually go to. It's just a matter of finding the right ones. And I think that's the thing that we need to have people be aware and do their research on.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned that, like doing your research and making sure that you understand exactly what you're getting from that educational institution. So from my experience, I think there are some amazing game development
Yeah.
programs out there. And for some people, right, having that structured environment where you can sit there and focus and have somebody kind of walk you step by step the things that you need to learn, there is some benefit to that. And I understand that there's some people that's the best type of environment for them to learn in, where they may not be like self-driven enough, where they just scan a bunch of video like YouTube tutorials and kind of pick
Yeah.
all of the ones that they need to know from there, right? And then also understanding that some of the valuable experience you can get through going to a college or university is the network that you pick
Yes.
up, right? Because if you graduate from a certain school, like that is a way of connecting directly to people in the industry that have gone through the same
Hmm.
program, right? Now, I don't know if that fulfills the entire cost of, how expensive those things are, but there's definitely some value that you can get from it. And that's something that I encourage as well. Plus things like there are some schools that only open up their internships to students that are currently in college or are
Yeah.
within 1 year of graduation. So that's another kind of asset that you can have where other people don't have access to it. just because you've gone to the right college or university. So there are some benefits, but
Uh,
again, with
uh,
regards to your particular situation, you have to understand, do the research, and then make the decision that's
yeah, I
best for
think
you.
one thing that would make sense is to have some sort of resource to show like a rating of certain schools that have, have really good programs, and being a very good info hub for people who want to know like what this college is about, and what, do they make a lot of, do they really show good benefits, and does it make sense for the value of money that I'm paying for it? All those things need to be exposed, and I don't want the predatory practices and all that stuff happening to anyone who wants to get into this industry. I want them to really get on the right track and be able to find the resources they need to get in there. And I think the one thing I would say is find a place that just teaches you straight to the point of what you need to learn. Forget about the ones that have programs that are accredited that will force you to take GEs and things like that. That is not the way to go. And I don't think you should have to go through that again, because it's fluff on top of things that you have to pay extra on. If you find a school that actually gives you a program that's dedicated to what you need to learn, and and on top of that too, I mean, there's people in there that know their stuff, or that they're in the industry or currently in the industry, that would bring that value. So yeah, go for it. But think about the cost you're putting into it. If the cost is going to be to the point where you can't handle it, and remember, a lot of students get into this trap because maybe they can get financial aid or whatnot, or maybe parents are paying for it, right? But you got to remember that stuff's gonna, like, you can go into debt at some point if you do get financial aid. You want to make sure that that value you're getting for it is going to pay off that debt. So biggest thing I would want people to understand is, when you put that research into it, think about the long term of what you're going to be doing when you're getting that kind of education, how much you're paying for it, because that investment is going to come back to you, whether it be bad or whether you get a good job, depends. But just cover yourself. And again, that's what was it? The cover, was it CM? Yeah,
CYA,
yes.
cover
You have
your
to cover your
assets.
assets, right? You got to make sure you uh think about a contingency at some point as well, as another thing. So um but yeah, I think this is a really good stuff that we talked about as far as trying to find a way to the industry. But there's other places that you can go that's not as formal, I would say. But if you are the person that can really be resourceful enough to find the right resources and just learning tutorials, or even some of the websites that actually offer selling just tutorials. I think one of them is Udemy is one. I think there's another one too that
Mhm.
have some programs, or at least some tutorials. Now, they may not be the best depending on the price you pay for it, but at least it's the starting point of learning. Um, that could be a good entryway as well, just learning what the process is. And on top of that, you have to be active in the community too. And I can't say this enough, because I know some people could be, either introvert or extrovert, right? Like, if you don't want to be going out there to socialize, or at least learning, networking with people, it'll really hinder. Depends on what it is. Like, if you don't go out there and network or talk to people or find mentors, um, it definitely will affect how long it's going to take for you to get into the career path. And if the bigger benefits, network with people, going to uh, meetings in like interest groups, like there's the IGDA that have chapters around the US, globally as well, that you can participate in.
Yep.
Get to know people who are in the industry, or at least maybe people who are like-minded like you, who are trying to get in the industry and understand what their hardships or maybe some benefits they've gotten, just to learn from people. And also, networking also is just, getting to know the person, and maybe possibly finding a mentor. There's a lot of things you can get out of it, but just be active is what you're gonna have to be. Um, Not a lot of things are gonna be brought to you and placed on your lap. There's a lot of things you're gonna have to work towards, and I think that's one of the things there. Having a network is a big benefit, and I gotta say, after working 17 plus years, I've developed a network, which is great. And I wouldn't have been able to go around to at least understand like where like all of these positions and stuff like that if it wasn't for my network. So very, very beneficial. So there's it's never too late to really start jumping in and being active and networking.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things coming from a recruiter's perspective, right? Understanding the entire hiring process. I love that you focused on the network because the network can be a source of trust that you can do what you say it is that you do, right? Because as a recruiter, like part of it is filtering through applications and job descriptions and resumes, like figuring out, like anybody can say that I'm good at something, but there's going to be, we need additional proof, right? And one huge source of proof is who can vouch for you.
Mm-hmm.
This is other people saying that, yes, so and so can do exactly what they say they did, right? And that's where I don't always have to know everybody myself. It's like I can rely on the expertise of people that I know, like, and trust on who, hey, who would you recommend that could do this job, right? Going back to kind of like the, when you were working in group projects, if I was going to ask you to recommend who is the best
Mm-hmm.
like designer that you've worked with that you would recommend for a job, think who are the people that you would recommend and what is about them. Why would you recommend them? Like, are they good at what they do? Like, were they cool to work with? I'm sure it's some accumulation of those types of soft skills
Yeah.
and hard skills. And that's why it's so important to build your network, because I'm sure you've heard that saying, it's not what you know, it's
Mm-hmm.
who you know. It goes even
Yeah.
deeper than that. It's not who you know, it's who knows you that you
Yeah.
can help. Because Emma, if I were to ask you, just with regards to food, who, where could I find the best
Mm-hmm.
ramen in San Diego? I'm sure you immediately have places that you can
Mm-hmm.
think of, right? Where could I get the best ramen? And it's probably because you've had some experience with those places, right? And sometimes you have to make a quick suggestion with very short amount of time, right? I didn't give you like weeks to think about it. It was like on the spot. And a lot of recruiting kind of happens that way, because as a job comes across my desk, they say, okay, we're looking for an engineer. Immediately, I'm thinking, who are the engineers that I know of that
Yeah.
fits this criteria? If I don't know any, I'm going to go to the development team and say, hey, do you guys know any engineers that you would like to bring onto the team? Right. So that's part of the way of finding a job, where it's not just as simple as you want to work as an engineer. You write in an application, or submit an application, and then magically it happens. There's a lot of nuances, and yeah, that's one of the things that I'm excited to go into during future episodes. So stay tuned for those.
Awesome. Yeah. With that said, one of the things that we're going to do at some point is we're going to get some guests coming in to talk about some of these topics, and we'll possibly get some students as well, just to see where they're coming from, and maybe talk to see what their journey is and how they're going through that. So it's definitely something worthwhile that we're going to go into. Yeah, but we're going to go through our closing, but let's take a break. We'll be right back. So you're listening to Pixel Kultura. We just finished talking about a few things. First, we want to introduce what our podcast is about. We want to talk about people in the industry that are Filipino, that's been in video games, but also in the entertainment industry as well. We did talk about a few other things as far as like our backgrounds, where we're coming from and how passionate we are and things like that. We talked about how we got into industry. We've talked about what the current state of the industry is, and the state of the industry is a bit gloomy at this point, but there's some things we can look forward to. There's going to be light at the end of the tunnel at some point, but for now, we just want to have some awareness of what that is right now. Career and entry paths. We've talked about how we can get in the industry for a student or a person who's trying to get in to some degree, with whether it be a channel through a school or whether it be through networking and finding tutorials. Those are definitely topics we want to bring up at some point. Steve, is there anything I missed? I think there's one thing I forgot to mention, or was that
Kind of
the
our
full run through what we
just
talked
going through our
about?
history, what our goals are for
Yeah,
the podcast, who we're looking to serve. Kind of what are some frameworks with regards to, okay, if you're just starting off, like what should you keep an eye out for in deciding your career path forward? And yeah, just how we can be of service. I know a big part of this is that this is the first episode and this will evolve, and we're looking to get some feedback from the audience on how can we improve this, how can we make this better, what types of guests they want us to have on here, and allow this to be
yes,
kind of like developing video games in that it's an iterative process, right? You start with something, a minimal
hmm
viable product, and then you work on it from there. So yeah, that's part of what we're doing right now.
yeah. Yeah, for you listeners out there, thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed our podcast, whether you're listening from the computer, from Spotify, from your phone, or you're in traffic right now, whatever it is. I appreciate the time for you to tune in and listen to us, and looking forward to having further episodes. We'll have additional guests coming in that falls within the industry that we work with, also with for the entertainment industry as well, and we'll have very, very interesting topics to bring up once in a while. If there is a suggestion, or if you feel like you want to be part of this, we'll announce where and when you can sign up for that. But thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. We'll hope to see you on our next podcast episode.
Right on. Thank you, everybody.